Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast brought to you by BetMGM. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined by Brett McMurphy and Colin Wilson, and this is our Heisman special, which means two things. The college football season's right around the corner, and if you scroll through our podcast feed, all 10 conferences, including the SEC for a 2-episode special, have been covered in depth. Every single FBS team, win totals, odds to win the conference, odds to win national championship. We get into all of it. And there's over, I think, 14 hours of audio that you can go through. You can also find us over at YouTube as well at the Action Network. So I'm going to pitch it to Colin for you first, as someone who's made it through the off-season voyage. At this point, week 0 can't get here any faster. How are you feeling? Where are you emotionally with the season right around the corner?
I feel great. I got the chance to go through the 3 podcasts that I wasn't a part of. Specifically, I think everybody should go back and review what you guys did, the work you did with the AAC, because we could spend another hour on Trent Dilfer, probably maybe some Hall of Fame BBOC type stuff. I'm feeling good about the season. I thought that those other 3 podcasts were excellent. Download them all. Download them twice. Listen once. It's so good. And I made a tweet last night about it, Calabrese. I said, listen, if you're not listening to the MAC preview, everybody out, these people doing other content, they'll come out and say, take these top 2 teams from the MAC. Boy, I tell you what, BBOC has got a different story about what goes on in that conference. So all of our podcasts, I would say download them and listen, because it's stuff you're not going to get anywhere else.
Now, Brett, I feel like you've been the number one newsbreaker in the industry. You've been, ahead of the game on these schools playing musical chairs, breaking the Washington and Oregon story to the Big Ten. Anything else simmering? Any side-eye emojis that you'd like to put out here on the podcast? Or do you think there'll be a little bit of calming of the seas, at least during the fall?
Yeah, this is coming out on Monday. We're taping it on Friday. Excuse me, today's Friday. I don't even know what day it is. When Colin's saying, "Oh, I'm great, I'm all rested," I feel like I've made this comparison before. I feel like one of these precogs on Minority Report, where I'm laying in a bath of water, and instead of predicting who's going to get murdered, I have to predict who's going to change a conference. And I just want to get to the end of the movie where I'm out on the coast in a nice house, sitting back reading a book without any devices around me. So unfortunately, that's not going to happen anytime soon. By the time this airs, we may have a resolution with the ACC. The Pac-4 may have found some new homes. Again, August 15th, so that's Tuesday or Wednesday. Check your calendar. That's the deadline for the schools to leave the ACC. So we could hear some announcements from Florida State, Clemson, etc. I would say that's doubtful. I'm not reporting that. That's just my opinion. That obviously could change over the weekend. If we can just get past August 20th, I think we'll be good until next season, or at least until after the season ends, as far as musical chairs.
Instead of eyeballs, it should be Brett tweeting out an emoji of golf, because last year he was golfing at Pebble and all hell broke loose in college football realignment. This year, him and I had a golf round, and I won't give you, what happened, but all hell broke loose when he almost had to pause the entire round. So anytime Brett is golfing, everything in college football is about to change.
All I know is I tweeted out the googly eyes because I knew some movements were going to be made, and that was related to conference realignment. And everyone was asking me, in the Slack channel, Brett, what is it? I won't tell anyone. And Colin's texting me going, is this something I need to know to get down on somebody? And I'm like, dude, I cannot tell anybody because I don't want to, expose my sources. But yeah, that was, it wasn't meant to I wasn't meant to keep people on the edge of their seat, or I wasn't trying to be a jerk about it, but it's just like, I've got something, but I can't go with it right now. It's going to have to wait a little bit. But no, that was quite an experience. Richard Deitch, the media reporter for The Athletic, sent me a pretty cool text. He goes, imagine that. You went from breaking news on Facebook to now you're getting over 3 million impressions by googly eyes. What a world.
Yeah, I imagine the film outro is just you collapsing at a clubhouse after playing a round of golf, just tweeting out Stanford back to the Ivy League or something like that, to that effect. So hopefully it will calm down for you. We can get to football, at least for this episode. We're certainly going to talk about football this upcoming season, and we're going to start with the Heisman Trophy odds. So I'm just going to throw out some of the top favorites, and then we can get into some of your favorite plays, value plays, long shots. I know this is a quarterback award. I believe 19 of the last 23 have played the quarterback position. But as we look at the board right now, Caleb Williams at the top, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, comes back. He's 11-2 at most books. Jaden Daniels at LSU, still arguably in a quarterback battle, but he's at 12-1, as is Quinn Ewers on the 40 acres. Then we have two players at 14-1. That's FSU's Jordan Travis, Clemson's Cade Klubnik out of the ACC, Michael Penix Jr. at 18-1, as well as Drake May, Bo Nix, and JJ McCarthy. Then it starts to get up there a little bit, and we get into the value conversation. Sam Hartman moving from Wake Forest to Notre Dame at 20-1, also 20-1. Carson Beck moving into that QB1 slot for the Georgia Bulldogs. Kyle McCord in a quarterback battle of his own in Columbus at 25-1 with Ohio State. Joe Milton and the biggest arm in college football, also at 25-1 playing for UT. Marvin Harrison Jr., 30-1. Drew Allar, 30-1. Some Big Ten value there. Dylan Gabriel, 40-1. Probably not Colin Wilson's pick. I know his thoughts on the Sooners this year. Connor Wiegand, 40-1 as well at Texas A&M. And we'll finish it up with Blake Corum at 50-1 coming off his knee injury as the running back at Michigan. So let's start with this grouping. Any one of those players that I mentioned from 11-2 all the way up to 50-1 that pop out to you as potentially being mispriced. We'll start with you first, Colin.
Interestingly enough, I'm going to start off the podcast with, I don't know if anyone was going to throw this out, but I do have a Drew Allar ticket in my portfolio. I have a 40-1. That number still exists out there, especially in parts around Penn State. So definitely shop around. But consensus is about 25-1. I mentioned this on the Big Ten podcast. No interceptions or turnover-worthy plays and 70 completions last year. It was a limited sample size behind Sean Clifford. But, he has everything that you need. A 5-star rating. He's the number 3 overall recruit from the 2022 class. I mean, Harold Perkins was number 5 to tell you how strong that class was. And when you look at it, he needs to just win 2 games on that schedule. Ohio State, Michigan, he wins those. This is a winning ticket if he makes it to the college football playoff. You don't have to win the national title. Penn State doesn't have to win the national title. This thing is voted on right after the end of the regular season and the conference championships. I think a 1-loss Penn State could possibly get Drew Allar the Heisman consideration, especially if they make the playoff. So he has everything there. And plus, I love the fact of what Sean Clifford, how he progressed under offensive coordinator Mike Yurcich, extremely cut down on his turnover-worthy plays. He became a competent quarterback, which he wasn't the years before Mike Yurcich showed up there. So 25-1 is out there for Drew Allar. Kind of goes hand in hand with your Penn State futures. If you have a national title, maybe pass on this. But if you have a college football playoff to make like I do, I put an additional bet on Drew Allar to win the Heisman.
I have 2 follow-ups there. First, go to Brett. This is just an inside baseball kind of question for me. When do you generally cast your Heisman ballot, and do you get a feel for your voters that you work with that they wait until the 11th hour, or do you find that people, the regular season's over, they can't wait to fire that vote in? Like, what's the time horizon? What's that window looking like for Heisman voters?
I mean, there still are people that vote probably even before the conference championship games. I hate to admit it, but there probably are. I wish the Heisman Trust would reveal that information or kick those guys out from voting, because there are literally 5,000 people vote for it now. I do think most people hold their ballot until after the conference championship games. I think, again, I don't think there's good value on anybody. I guess this will be a short pod for me. You'll kick me off because I just think it's you're playing the lottery. You can't go into the season and say this guy is going to be it. Joe Burrow. I mean, we can go down the whole list of people before the season. You couldn't say that. So I think the Heisman has become, as you mentioned, Mike, it's a quarterback award. Everyone says, well, there's great value on this running back or this defensive player, whatever. Look, just send me the money. I'll book it. Okay. If you think a non-quarterback's going to win, serious. My email's on my Twitter account. I'll book anything you want. And the award, and I hate this, it's become who is on one of the, like Colin said, you don't have to win the playoff. You do, I think, have to play in a conference championship game. That's what this award has become. And it's become a moment, not a season-long award. So it's almost like what happens the last 2 weeks of the season, who's on the best teams, who's a quarterback, and that's going to be your winner. So when I try to say before the season, if you want to pin me down on somebody, that's what I'm looking at. I'm not necessarily, I am looking at the players, but I'm also looking more at the teams. What teams are going to be alive? You know, a player may be the best individual player, but gone are the days that you can be on a 9-3 team and still have a chance at the Heisman. It's become a moment award. I hate it. I'm repeating myself. So look for teams you think that can get to their conference championship and has a quarterback, and then that take that guy, and you've got as good a shot as anybody.
I think to add on to that, Calabrese, is that I think the only two players that have won the Heisman that didn't make the playoff was Caleb Williams last year and Lamar Jackson. Now, Lamar is a separate story, right? Just ungodly numbers that I'm not sure are ever going to be matched. But with Caleb last year, CJ Stroud didn't play in a conference championship game. You know, Bryce Young didn't play in a conference championship game. Those two favorites at the beginning of the season that everybody was talking about, that Vegas essentially took a bath on, they didn't even play in conference championship weekend. So Brett's right. There's such an emphasis on a moment on December 2nd this year, that if you are in that weekend, you can stake your claim into this Heisman. So I think it is very important that you take somebody. Generally, it has to be a team that makes a college football playoff.
My follow-up on Allar is a lot of people love to, at least be able to visualize the comp. So when it comes to Yursich, do you, in terms of a comp, put him closer to Mason Rudolph, who had a huge season in his final year with Yursich? Like, he put up huge numbers. He had James Washington on the perimeter, but he was able to accumulate those big stats without running the ball all that often. So it's pretty rare for a pocket passer to get to New York, let alone win it. But do you think he has what it takes based on the offense and the way that Yursich wants to spread the ball around? Because he does have a lot of mouths to feed, particularly those two running backs in the backfield.
Yeah, Singleton, absolutely, and Keytron. They're going to have all of the highlights. It just depends on, like, can I hit them on a wheel route? But, then again, Tinsley, I remember last year, Brett and I interviewed Tinsley on the field after the Rose Bowl last year, and I was asking about his move in the transfer portal from Western Kentucky to Penn State. This is a place where wide receivers can thrive. And, you're right. There are two horses in the backfield that could take away some of those highlights. But at the same time, like Brett just said, this is a quarterback-driven award, and I'm looking for the best value on a quarterback that is on a team that I believe is going to make the college football playoff. And he's got the pedigree. He's got the offensive coordinator. Just got to hope Nick Singleton isn't taking everything to the house, or, everything is a rushing touchdown here with Penn State.
Speaking of value, and you want to shop around because you may be able to get it at better than 14-1. I like Cade Klubnik, and it's pretty simple. I think arguably the best coaching hire of the offseason, head coach, coordinator, either one, was Garrett Riley, coming from TCU and heading to Clemson. And he worked wonders last year with Max Duggan. I mean, you look at a guy who didn't win the job in August, gets thrown in the first game due to injury for Chandler Morris, and then finishes the year with close to 3,700 passing yards, 32 TDs, almost 500 yards rushing, another 9 scores on the ground. And that was with kind of a player who was projecting to be more of a career backup. He ends up getting drafted in the NFL because of what Garrett Riley did for him. And now we look at Klubnik, who's a 5-star kid, tons of potential in terms of his physicality, but I also love what Clemson has around him. I mean, the receiving core, I think, was just misused. The play calling wasn't right. So a player like Bo Collins, who was a big play guy for them last year, he could slot into that Quentin Johnston role and hit those big plays. Antonio Williams in the slot could be a star. And then Will Shipley gives them balance right away in front of a line that returns 80% of their starters. I also like the narrative of, do you have the opportunity in big games? And are they spread out on your schedule so that you don't go 5-6 weeks without getting that national exposure? They're home against Florida State on September 23rd. They're home against Notre Dame on November 4th. And that South Carolina game, the Palmetto Bowl, could end up being a huge opportunity for them to beat, an 8-9 win SEC team if everything keeps going right for South Carolina in a revenge spot from last year, and then an ACC title game. I like the way the schedule shakes out. I think I would like it a little bit more if I could get it at close to 17-1. As I said, I like to shop around, but Klubnik, I think, is undervalued a little bit. I would put him above a guy like Quinn Ewers, in my opinion. I think because of the offensive system, he has a better chance to shine. What do you think about that read, Colin? Do you think I'm viewing him in the right light, or do you think him being sub 20-1 just not enough value?
No, I think it does have value, and I'll tell you why. I mean, I know that value on the board in August is tough to find, but when you consider that Clemson is 18-1 to win the national title and Cade Klubnik is around 14-1 to win the Heisman, which one would you rather have? Clemson has to win 2 more games after they make the playoff. Sure, you're rolling the dice, but if Clemson waltzes into the playoff undefeated, that Cade Klubnik, I can't see him finishing worse than second in the Heisman voting. This is a bet on Garrett Riley, and that was a pretty good bet to make last year, especially with a squad that was, highly talented, highly explosive, but he got them up there in success rate. He got the offensive line to get a push. Garrett Riley, he proved everything in the world last year that he could beat anybody except for Georgia. So I think this is a good bet when you put it in terms of where the future is for Clemson's national title odds. This is about the same. You only have to win 2 less games, and I think Clemson's going to the playoff.
Question for you, Brett, in terms of competing against yourself, so to speak. You saw Andrew Luck run into this, during his final years at Stanford, where the hype, the previous production made it difficult for him to, quote unquote, wow the voters. Do you see that as still being a problem for someone like Drake May? Has a huge breakout freshman season, puts up huge stats, but it almost makes it difficult to, eclipse those stats. Is that something you consider when you're putting together, your ballot, where, how much wow factor from a statistical standpoint is there? Because sometimes it's easier to go with a clean slate as opposed to besting your career best numbers coming in. Am I thinking about that in the right way, or is that something you put out of your mind when you put together your ballot?
Yeah, Mike, I don't think most people are looking at it specifically with Drake May. I think again, unfortunately, I think they're going to look more at Carolina's success. If they can, double digit wins, I think he's got a shot. He could, just blow away his numbers from last year. And if they're 9-3, I don't think he's got I don't think he has a chance. It's funny, and we didn't talk about this before we came on. I actually had 2 guys that I kind of listed as who I would actually pick. And Cade was one of them. And the other one's Jordan Travis of Florida State. And I'm looking at it because Alabama's quarterback's not going to win it. Georgia's quarterback's not going to win it because Brock Bowers will get all the headlines, and a tight end's not going to win it. Ohio State's QB is not going to win it. Michigan's QB doesn't have the offense. The Pac-12 has probably the best group of quarterbacks in the country, but they're going to cannibalize each other. Nobody's going to escape the Pac-12, the fewer than 2 losses. The Big 12, Ewers maybe has a shot, but Texas has to prove it to me. So I'm looking at it, Jordan Travis or Cade, and I exactly how you laid it out. You look at Florida State's schedule; they open against LSU on Sunday night, the big game at Clemson. And then they have some breathers, and then Miami, which is a big game on paper anyway. And then they end up at Florida, an SEC opponent, and then potentially the ACC title game. So I'm drinking the Florida State Kool-Aid. I ranked them number 3 on my AP ballot. Thank you for everybody on Twitter that agreed with all 25 of my selections. But I'm kind of going that way because it's a long shot. I don't know what Florida State's title odds are, but I'm agreeing with you that I think the winner of that Florida State Clemson game, if they can keep their sheet clean, if you will, the rest of the way and get to the playoffs with the 12-1 record, then I think whatever, if it's Florida State, if it's Clemson, I think Jordan or Cade would have a legitimate shot to win. And I'm sure we'll talk about Caleb Williams' chances later on. But yeah, I like Cade, but I would also go with Jordan Travis as a long shot.
Colin, do you view that Sunday night standalone game between FSU and LSU as kind of a launching pad for either Daniels or Travis to really cement themselves as a Heisman frontrunner right away?
Yeah, you're missing a name in there, right? You're missing Nussmeier.
Nussmeier. I mean, you've said it, and for that reason, I bought myself a Nussmeier 100-1 ticket just in case. I think there's a ton of value there. Is that something that you've also done?
At 100-1, yes. But the number when I was shopping for Heisman back this summer, and I was out in Vegas, it opened at 60-1 and went down to 20-1. I thought, oh my goodness, how much exposure does this mega book here on the Strip have on Garrett Nussmeier? The arm is there, the talent is there, the knowledge of the offense is there, the coaching staff backs him and loves him. If there's a deterrent Jaden Daniels came back into camp, I think, with 15 more pounds of muscle on him. He's not going to get hurt running the inside zone. He was pretty beat up by the time they got to their November schedule, like the Arkansas game last year. So with Nuss, it's about playing time. But, one snap and Jaden McDaniels out and Nussmeier comes in and wins that game against Florida State, that 100-1 is looking great, especially since Colin Wilson picked LSU to win the national title. So, and this is one of the reasons, right? You got two quarterbacks that could win the Heisman, and there's not a lot of that out there. There's a lot of quarterbacks in the market that I dislike, right? Like, I don't think Joe Milton can make it to the end of the season. I think Nico may be the starter by the end of September. I think this is one situation with LSU. If I bought a Jaden Daniels, I'd put like a half unit on Jaden Daniels. If you like him that much, I put a half unit on Nussmeier too. Like, you want to think about the backup. If you think this is a playoff team, you think the quarterback's going to compete for the Heisman, you might want to go out and shed a little bit of money on the backup too. And Nuss is the number one example of why you'd want to do that.
Now, when it comes to the Heisman Trophy, as we know, getting off to a hot start, first impressions are crucial. And when I'm trying to make a good impression here on BBOC, I'm trying to look my best, which ties in with our newest sponsor, Caldera Lab. They sent over a whole suite of skincare products for all of the Action Network talent to start using. And I got to say, I put it into my daily routine about 3 to 4 days ago, get out of the shower, put on their Icon Serum, and already it's yielding results. So no one will know that I'm staying up late to watch Pac-12 After Dark this season. Rest in peace to the Pac-12. Just a whole line, moisturizers, serums, cleansers. These things are great. Caldera Lab has been phenomenal to work with thus far. You're going to hear more about them as the season unfolds. And it's not just for the Action Network talent. It's also for our audience, our loyal listeners. We have an exclusive offer, the best offer that Caldera Lab is putting out there to their users. Use code BBOC at calderalab.com for 20% off right now. That's 20% off with code BBOC at calderalab.com. Make an unforgettable first impression where people are saying to you, wow, you look a lot younger. Easy for me to say. So hopefully someone will confuse you for a Heisman candidate yourself. That's 20% off at calderalab.com with code BBOC. All right, let's hop back into it for...
Hold on. You're like 17 years old. Why in the world are you getting that? You need to ship it to me, all right? If anybody needs that, I do. Action folks, Matt Mitchell, get on that right away. I will test it out and give a review in a future pod.
Might need to put some on your putter and your wedge too. That could use some cleanup there too. It was a little shady this summer.
I'm gonna have to get Brett
bragging about a tie. Amazing.
I'm gonna have to get Brett to my Thanksgiving, because between my mother and my cousin Matt just absolutely unloading on the saddlebags under my eyes, I could use a little boost. So I appreciate it, saying that I look like a Heisman candidate myself. Hopefully Caldera Lab can make it that way all season long. All right, let's hop back in to my favorite part of this discussion, because there's generally a long shot that gets to New York. Obviously, this is an award that goes to quarterbacks. More often than not, it's quarterbacks that start 20-1, sub 20-1 in the preseason. But you can get a ticket to New York 60, 80, 100-1, and then you have great hedge opportunities. So this is where we're going to start. And I'm going to throw one out there because Brett said the Ohio State quarterback has no chance to win this award. And I agree in regards to Kyle McCord. But Kyle McCord may not be the starting quarterback. It is still neck and neck. At least that's the way Ryan Day is portraying it. I am following with incredible interest every single spring practice. I've never watched more, 7-on-7 drills and passing against air than I have via Twitter this summer. And Devin Brown's right there, wearing number 33 for slinging Sammy Baugh. I like the guy at 80-1. The fact that he's still sitting there at 80-1, I think presents value. Because when you look at what Ryan Day has done with first-year starting quarterbacks in Columbus, it's absurd. The average numbers, 4,200 passing yards, just a hair under 10 yards per attempt, with an average touchdown-to-pick ratio of 45-6. If he wins this job, overnight he's 15, 18-1. So the value is going to dry up instantly. This is akin, at least in my opinion, to a two-leg parlay. You got to win the job, and got to win the Heisman. And I'm going to put out something else in terms of their schedule. Tasty opening. They get Indiana, Youngstown State, no disrespect to the Penguins, and Western Kentucky. He could put up 12 touchdowns in those 3 games. And then they have great opportunities for marquee wins at Notre Dame, home against Penn State, and at Michigan. And the at Michigan element to me, the perceived bump of breaking the 2-game losing streak, I think that's really where, even if he doesn't have as statistically a dominant season as Stroud did last year, I think that's the springboard to get him over the top to potentially win the Heisman Trophy. 80-1, I'm interested. This ticket could be dead by the time you're listening to it next week if they name Kyle McCord the starting quarterback, but I can't resist at 80-1. Colin, I see you nod along. Do you agree with me?
Well, yeah, and I love these to get to New York bets. RIP to my Desmond Ritter 50-1 to get to New York, which was really close a couple of years ago. The one that I like that I wanted to mention, the long shot that I like, I don't think he can win it because he is a running back, but I definitely think that he has a seat on Heisman Trophy row is going to be Quinshon Judkins. And, Stuckey and I, if you guys go listen to the SEC West podcast, talk about what Ole Miss is going to be this season from an offensive perspective. If Ole Miss is the team that surprises in the West, even if they're not in the SEC championship game, and even if they don't win the West, he could still put up gaudy numbers that could be good enough for him to be the running back that they do invite to come and sit there and be one of the nominees. And when you look at it, you say, well, there's other running backs out there that are just as good. I would argue that there isn't. And this is a guy that watches practice tape of Raheem Sanders almost every day. Like when you look at the numbers, he averages 3.5 yards after contact. There's only one running back coming back to college football that created more missed tackles than Quinshon Judkins, and that was Frank Gore Jr. And Frank Gore Jr. is not going to New York. I'm sorry. Auntie's not going to go to New York. Frank Gore Jr. is not going to go to New York. But Quinshon Judkins absolutely can, I think, if Ole Miss turns into a 10-win team. So to kind of pony off of Stuckey's, not to blow it if you haven't listened to the podcast, but to go off Stuckey's steam that he had on the SEC West, if I had to pick a running back that's going to get to New York, I would take odds on Judkins to be there.
Just a quick follow-up there. Which quarterback would you prefer to be leading the offense? Because when you talk about Rocket Sanders at Arkansas, I would be more bullish on him winning the Doak, maybe getting to New York if Jefferson wasn't stealing, vulturing, goal line touchdowns from him. Is it a similar situation if Ole Miss goes with the right quarterback as opposed to somebody who's a little bit more of a dual threat?
I could see games turning into shootouts. With the way that although Lane has been heavy, he's floating more to heavy rush than a heavy pass. If Spencer Sanders is the quarterback there, you could see an abundance of passing yards, which could take away. But it also, Spencer Sanders is he knows how to hit his running backs in the flats and let them take off. I mean, that is one of the the Gundy plays out there that I've seen Spencer Sanders run for years. So maybe that's better than Jackson's dart. I'm not really sure I've seen swing passes out of Dart's game. So maybe Spencer Sanders is the quarterback that you want to be there if you got a Quinshon Judkins ticket.
Anybody long shot quarterback or, just dipping your toe into the other positions, Brett? I know that it's kind of sacrilege, but is Harold, who's the outside linebacker for LSU, the freshman, Harold Perkins Jr. Yeah, I mean, I would need like 300-1 for a defensive player to even get interested, and I know that he's sitting at about 150-1. That's probably not rich enough for your blood, but any long shot on the board that you like, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, if you can find to get to New York, I don't know what the numbers are. If you guys have them, let me know. Brock Bowers to get to New York, I think would be a very solid play because the narrative of him last year was he was one of the best players in the country, but he was a tight end. And you look at Georgia's schedule, you guys have talked about it. Double-digit favorite in every game projected going into this season. They're going to go 12-0. He's going to have a lot of big plays. He doesn't have to have monster numbers because, again, Heisman voters, they look for numbers, but they also love good stories. And the narrative about all these quarterbacks are winning this, there will some columnist from some, national outlet will write why can't Brock Bowers win the Heisman? And then he'll get all this support. It's a great story. And it'll just go on and on and on. And Georgia will roll through the schedule. Georgia meets the qualification as a team that will be in the conference championship game. I think with Beck coming in at quarterback, I think Bowers will get a lot of love, and Heisman voters love a good story. And I don't think he can win it, but I think, yeah, you tell me he's going to be one of the 4 or 5 in New York, I'd absolutely take a flyer on that.
Yeah, well, Mike, jumping on the whole defensive player, I don't think you can bet on defensive player to make it to New York, but you can vote on to make it to New York. And if there was a defensive player to make it, it wouldn't be Harold Perkins for me. It would be Kool-Aid McKinstry. He does a lot for Alabama in special teams, but also he is the leading defensive back in the nation coming in this season. 18 forced incompletions. He had 16 PBUs. Like I said, he's a contributor on special teams. He's going to be Mr. Everything for Bama in that secondary where Kool-Aid lines up, quarterbacks are going to go away from. And shout out to his bling at SEC Media Days. Holy cow, he had the whole Kool-Aid chain going on. It was great. But no, if you could find a Kool-Aid McKinstry, which I believe he's about 300 to 1 in the Heisman market. So I'm going to say, I don't know, 80 to 1, 75 to 1. If you can find something like that, I mean, go skip on your guac at Chipotle or just spend your whole Chipotle bowl on that, because that would be a fun bet.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up him being kind of a Swiss Army knife for the Crimson Tide, because I think Travis Hunter gets more of that love in the offseason with Colorado. There's this feeling that they need a little extra pop on the perimeter. He'll be involved in the return game, if he gets 5 or 6 picks, but they're not going to win 6 games this year. Whereas Alabama, it's very easy to imagine them at least getting to Atlanta and playing in the conference championship game. So I like that play. Outside of defensive players, is there anybody else that's a long shot on your board that you think has value, either just to be a finalist or to win the award outright?
I believe I've talked way too much about Dante Moore in our podcast, right? We haven't even seen him take a snap in college football. But I keep hearing that the game is easy to him. And I keep hearing that there's no drop-off from DTR. I'm really excited to see. I could not put money down, no matter how high the number is. I think 150 to 1 on Dante Moore. I'm not sure I could do that. But what I would be interested in, if I was going to do a long shot, Tanner Mordecai can absolutely sling the ball, and he's in a Phil Longo offense. I don't know if the offensive line is going to be able to pass block for him. I don't know if you're going to be able to sling in 20-degree weather in Camp Randall in November. All I know is there's a good passer there, and there's an up-tempo, 4 verts offensive coordinator, and Tanner Mordecai is about 100 to 1 on the board. So if there's a long shot, that one's got the ingredients.
Yeah, I think I have bigger concerns about them on the perimeter. It's because at SMU, It wasn't like he had an elite Secret Service level protection from his front 5. But yeah, the perimeter weapons at Wisconsin, that's the question. Rashee Rice last year just made it a lot easier for him to run that offense. But yeah, I agree. Phil Longo, you have to look at who are the players who have the opportunity to accumulate the stats. And in some cases, really good teams, they get pulled early, they get pulled in blowouts. They're not playing full 4-quarter games all throughout their non-conference schedule. I don't think that's going to be the case with Wisconsin. So he certainly could be in the running for that September Heisman, someone who steams out with huge stats, a la Geno Smith at West Virginia, about 12 years ago now, dating ourselves. But I do think he's an interesting play. And if you have an opportunity to maybe cash out at that point before he gets into the heart of Big Ten play, that could be interesting. Any final thoughts, Brett, on the upcoming season for college football now that we are at the end of the road? A reminder to our audience that we've done a preview for all 10 FBS conferences. That means we've touched all 133 FBS programs, win totals for all of them, conference title odds, except for a few teams that are ineligible, tisk to the NCAA, James Madison, Jacksonville State, Sam Houston State. Let them cook. Let them get a chance to win in year one. But if you listen in, we have ways to bet on every single team. So I'll kick it back to you, Brett. Who do you like here in terms of, not necessarily a play, but a team that you're most excited to see either in week 0 or week 1? You want to flip on your TV and really get up to speed on a program to see how they're working here in 2023.
Well, the LSU Florida State game is going to be fascinating. And, Colin says he likes LSU to win the national title. Then they can't lose that game, because that means if they lose that game, they've got to run the table. And I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that's realistic for Florida State either, that they can't run the table. And that's what sucks about the 4-team playoff is you have these monster games and the loser is behind the 8 ball. Next year we won't have to worry about that when we go to 12 teams. So I'm psyched about that game. And real quick, going back to Heisman, we didn't talk about him, but one thing that I would wager on concerning the Heisman Trophy, if you can find it, Caleb Williams not to win the Heisman Trophy. Because what happens is when you win the Heisman Trophy and you return, the voters, I'm not talking about me, but the other people that vote, including Colin Wilson, they look at not what you do this year, but what you're not doing that you did last year. If you have 300 yards, 3 TDs, and a pick, Everyone's, analyzing why did they throw the interception. I think because somebody wins it the year before, everyone wants to tear him down. The Heisman voters want a new story. They want something fresh. Nothing against Caleb Williams. I just think he could have better numbers than last year, and he's not going to win it. So I would stay off of him and look elsewhere. But, he'll have the opportunity with the Pac-12 being so good. But again, I just think they'll beat each other up, and that will kill his chances as well.
Other than Navy catching 20.5 in the opener in Ireland, what are you most excited about, Colin, here in week 0, week 1?
I don't think Florida International is going to wear the Miami Vice uniforms on the road against La Tech. I hope they do. I will say that I can't even believe I'm saying this because the number's steaming. I've had my eye on it at 10.5. It's a number that I make down around 6. I think there is going to be some buyback on that. I shouldn't even be talking about Florida International here at the very beginning of the season against La Tech, but that's where we're at with week 0. I'm sure Stuckey and I will have more opinions on it when we get closer to that, but I'm really looking forward to a depleted trench and a depleted secondary of San Diego State going up against an exclusive quarterback and wide receiver that Ohio has. I would encourage everybody to go out and listen to Mike's Maction podcast that he cut with Ianello and Stuckey. It's excellent. That is a banger in week 0. I absolutely expect Ohio to get into San Diego State's secondary. I was told specifically at Mountain West Median Days to stop betting on San Diego State overs. Don't think I can help myself in week 0.
Just a bit of housekeeping here for our audience. If you've been listening in all preseason, you got all 10 of the conference previews at your fingertips. You now have your Heisman episode here. And we have a few more before we get into week 0. We have our preseason best bets episode where we'll wrap up all of our best futures and win totals. We also have our Action Network All-American team. And then we get into the G5 week 0 and then the full episode of week 0 with Colin and Stuckey. So we're going to have you covered from every single angle coming in the next, about 2 weeks here, leading right up to the college football season. We've made it through the arduous, long, desert-like offseason here in college football. We're here. And I couldn't be more excited, to be honest with you. At this point, it is going to be so exciting to get into the weekly grinds, those recap videos, the, listening to your voicemails that you call in. That's what keeps us going throughout the season. You know what else keeps us going? Those reviews. So please review, hit us up. We'll give away merch throughout the season. Also on our social media feeds and YouTube. And subscribe, unsubscribe, subscribe again, as you know, here on BBOC. Tell a friend, tell an enemy. For Brett McMurphy and Colin Wilson, I'm Mike Calabrese. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.